I'm going to try to keep this to an hour this evening. I think sitting in these chairs for an hour listening is about long enough. My name is Peggy Morrison, and I live at 4415 South Avenue West. What we have done just now is hopefully model for you how we would like you to present your information to the group. Identify yourself. If you would be kind enough to offer your information and questions to either George or to myself. If you've asked a question and we know that it can be answered by someone in the group, I will get someone in the group to answer that question. If you have asked us a question to which we don't know the answer at the moment, I have 3 wonderful people at the back of the table there who will be writing your questions down. And if we have an email address for you, we can get the answer to your question to you. Or we can say, hey, we haven't been able to find an answer. This is strictly informational tonight. We are not headed toward a decision. We are not headed toward making a plan. We are simply here to be educated, to share the information that we all currently have on the Maclay Bridge. We have with us this evening 2 gentlemen who graciously gave up their evening from the Department of Transportation, and Doug Moeller, who is the district supervisor, and Kent Barnes, who is a bridge engineer and can answer some of our questions. Thank you, gentlemen. Other than the presenters, and this evening it'll be basically 2 gentlemen from the Maclay Bridge Alliance, everyone will have 3 minutes. Now that doesn't mean you can only have 1 3-minute period. If we've gotten through all of the people that want to ask questions or make comments, and you have a second thought you want to present, please do so. There's a microphone in the back there that those of you towards the rear, if you'd like, you can walk to that mic. George and I will both have access to mics here that we can bring to you. I ask that you put it on a mic because there are some of us that don't hear as well as we used to. And it would be nice for everyone in the audience to be able to hear the questions and the responses and so on. George, is there anything I haven't covered at this point? Inevitably, there will be something as we go along. But at any rate, this is being taped by MCAT. Ron, do you know whether we'll be on the program or are we just getting taped? Are we on the programming schedule on the TV? All right, we'll check on that. Brianna Roy is with us this evening from KPAX. So Missoula will know what we are doing this evening, and they will be listening and hopefully helping us come up with information. Right now, I would like to turn this over to Willis Curdy. And Willis, I'll let you identify yourself and what you're going to do.
Good evening. I would like to thank Mr. Mueller and Mr. Barnes for coming here this evening. I really appreciate their time in coming and answering questions and helping us understand what is going on in the process. Just quickly, I'm Willis Curdy. I live at 11280 Kona Ranch Road. That is about 300 yards to the west of the Kona Bridge. And my wife and I have lived there since 1982. We were there at the building of the Kona Bridge. We watched it from the get-go to the completion. So we have some familiarity with the bridge building process and what it entails. I'm a member of the Maclay Bridge Alliance, and also I represent the Big Flat area on the Target Range Homeowners Association. If you remember back in 1993-94, there was an effort to build a bridge at the south end of South Avenue, or at the west end of South Avenue. And of course, that bridge, or the failure to build the bridge that time, kind of put everybody on hold, and it was kind of the back of people's minds until this summer, when a Target Range resident happened to be cleaning up around the Maclay Bridge area, and he met with a number of folks from the Montana Department of Transportation and county officials who were mapping and doing survey work for what they said was a replacement for the Maclay Bridge. Subsequently, I met with Greg Robertson. He is the Director of Public Works for Missoula County, and to discuss the county's intentions for the bridge and its replacement. And he confirmed to me that they were looking at a Kona-style bridge structure, and that they were in the process of working, putting together a memorandum of agreement with the Montana Department of Transportation. At that point, a number of folks in the Target Range areas were alerted, and we began to have bi-weekly meetings to discuss where we need to go to look at research options for the proposed Maclay Bridge replacement. Subsequently, Fred Stewart and I attended a conference call at the Montana Department of Transportation office here in Missoula. They were kind enough to open the meeting to us, and the conference call was with Federal Highway Administration officials, as well as Montana Department of Transportation engineers in Helena. And most of the discussion was over which environmental review to be used for the Maclay Bridge replacement and the draft memorandum of agreement. Later on, a group of us met at the County Public Works office and reviewed all the documents related to bridge structure, bridge health, traffic counts, and the like that Missoula County Public Works Department had in their possession. And subsequently, we made copies of a number of those documents, which are currently on the Maclay Bridge Alliance website. And of course, that information we've picked up will be used later when Bob talks about the explanation of the facts that will be used tonight. We've also held individual meetings and have attended county commissioner meetings to discuss issues related to the proposed bridge. And we have made a request to the county commissioners for a feasibility study to determine the need for a bridge replacement. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have developed a website, maclaybridgealliance.org, and we are continuing our bi-weekly meetings, as well as conducting research and consultation with area engineers and discussion of potential upgrades to the current structure. And I think that's it for the time being.
Thank you, Willis. I'm going to use the podium here, if you don't mind. I'm going to try to keep track of these facts as we go through them, but what I would like to do is kind of go through each fact and give you, to the best of my ability, a brief explanation of it. And if during that brief discussion, if something crosses your mind, you have a question or a comment, I believe it's okay if they go ahead and ask. So please go ahead and do so. With that in mind, this is kind of a rapidly moving target in some respects, and as many of you are aware, there's been quite a lot of quite a few articles in the paper and so on, and some of the comments that have followed that lead us to believe that there's some misinformation out there. And so one of the things that I'd kind of like to set straight right from the beginning here is that the mayor of Missoula is not involved in this to my knowledge, in any way, shape, or form. And so if you have a question or a problem or want to make a comment to the folks in charge, you need to address it to the county commissioners. They're the ones that make the decision whether we go or don't go with this project. So that's item number one here. The next one, you can follow along. I have we have provided a fact sheet with explanations before you. And I'm not going to read everything I've written down there, but you can kind of follow along. You may have some questions from that already, and that's fine. But Missoula County is preparing a memorandum of agreement between the county and the Montana Department of Transportation for the design and construction of the replacement bridge. The significance of that is that it is for design and replacement, and it's not for investigation or anything other than perhaps the environmental studies that preclude or predate the actual bridge design. But that document is in its draft form, and it has basically told us that the state will be responsible for design and construction of the bridge. They will be responsible for the design of the approaches, and the county will be responsible for the construction. So this is not a freebie for those of us that live in this area. One way or the other, the county is going to pay for some of this. We have no idea at this point. The nearest cost that we have was derived in 1993 for that estimate was $13 million for the bridge and the approaches. I don't know.
We can look that up and find it. We just don't have
it. By the way, I neglected to introduce myself. I am Bob Schweitzer, and I am a member of both Target Range Homeowners and the Bridge Alliance. Federal funding for this project was considered in 1993, and basically it seems to have gone to sleep at that time period or after 1994. Nevertheless, in 2002, Missoula County designated Maclay Bridge replacement as a first priority for an off-system bridge replacement. And that prioritization is one of the things that has us concerned. We have the estimated cost in 1993 was $13 million, as I mentioned, and that cost has never been updated. The 1993 environmental assessment never did produce a record of decision. So what that means is there's not a finalized determination that the bridge will be at, for example, the west end of South Avenue, or any alignments or anything like that. It still remains to be determined. Well, what they're talking about, as far as we know, is at the extension of South Avenue. That appears to be the preferred solution to this whole thing. So,
Certainly. Let's get on mics here. So
We'll just add a little bit more to that, Bob.
That's great.
Thank you. Again, I'm Kent Barnes. I'm out of the Department of Transportation in Helena. And we have been trying to develop an MOU with the county. And the title of that is for design and replacement of the bridge. But please understand that what that process does mean is an environmental review takes place. And there is no decision at this point on what would be built or if something would be built. The MOU is just to lay out who's responsible for what, because we as the Department of Transportation kind of get perceived as we're in charge. And this is a county project, and we want it clear in that MOU that this is a county project, and it is the county that is in charge, and we are working more in a support role to them. So, but the MOU really is intended to just lay out those types of items. There is no decision on where it would go. There would be the process would involve an environmental process, and exactly what that would be, I don't exactly know. That would have to be determined. But that would involve a significant amount of public involvement, public input, and the result of that is uncertain. It could be no build, it could be replace here, it could be upgrade. The decision of that is completely up in the air, and that is one of the reasons that I can't really give a cost estimate at this point, because there is no decision on what direction we're going. I can't give a cost estimate without knowing what we're going to do. I could give a cost estimate, which I don't have, for many different options, but I don't have those yet.
would you mind coming up to the mic?
Can you guys hear me? So you'll be updating the 93 EA, or you're going to be starting from scratch to determine whether you might need an EIS or an EA or something further?
Just repeat the question.
The question was, would we just update the 93, 94 EA, or what process would we take? And from an MDT standpoint, what we would want to do is start out with a feasibility study. And that would really predate or precede a true environmental document. So the first thing we would want to do, and we would ask the county to do, would be do a feasibility study. And that would really be looking at, is this even a feasible project? And out of that would come, yes, it is a feasible project. We should move forward into an environmental document, and it would be a guide for what type of an environmental document would be necessary at that point. But that feasibility study would involve significant public input.
I wondered if you could explain what components of the feasibility study would be. Who would participate, how long it generally takes, that kind of thing, if you could clarify that part.
And again, this would be a county-run project, so to a large degree that would be determined by the county and the public, and exactly what that would take. Our role as MDT would be to guide them and help them out in that process, but really it would be a county-run project, and they are the ones that would really be determining what all it would be, as long as it met reasonable. We would be looking at it from a guiding standpoint to ensure that there is proper public input and a proper decision-making process that can be supported on the record.
And the public would be involved, or how does that work?
The public would be involved in that. And exactly how, that is something that would have to be determined as that started up. Would it be an advisory committee and public meetings, or exactly how that would be done? That's unclear, and that would be county-driven. Our role, again, would be to make sure that it was a proper feasibility study that properly involved all the stakeholders.
But this would be a stage prior to the EA or EIS, is that correct?
That is correct. A feasibility study would would either lead us to a project and an environmental document, or lead us to the conclusion that we don't need a project here at this time.
And then, but this process can also be included into that environmental process. It isn't time wasted. Some of that
feed
information
into
gathering
the EA.
will feed into that environmental document. So it's not
Exactly.
wasted time.
No, no.
It's a good.
But it
it's a good
sounds like
procedure.
it's a money saver, is that right? It could be. If it is determined that there is no bridge replacement, then you would have saved some money, right?
That'd be one way to look at it. A feasibility study can be a money saver just in trying to bring up issues early on without committing to a project. And you can make if it becomes apparent early on that no build is the way to go, you save money because of the process you've gone through, yes.
Thank you, Kent. The next item I have is that Maclay Bridge is structurally sound and safe for the present uses. And as I'm sure you've all noticed if you've driven the bridge and so on, it's posted. It has weight limits and vehicle weight limits. So if you remain under those weight limits and so forth, why it's a safe bridge. The structural integrity is further confirmed by health index, a rating of 96.39 on a scale of 0 to 100. The health index requires a little bit of explanation here because as near as I can tell, it's a relatively new concept, and as a matter of fact, does not even appear on the bridge inspection reports prior to 2003, I believe. It's the 2002 report that we have does not have a health index. 2003 does. And what the health index does is it looks at the components of the bridge itself. I mean, not approaches, not alignments or anything extraneous. It's just the bridge, and it looks at the substructure and the superstructure and the deck and all of those things that make the bridge viable. And that bridge has probably, if not the highest, it's one of the highest health index ratings in Missoula County.
Why do we not?
That's what we're here to look into. So, Maclay Bridge, however, is functionally obsolete, and that's a determination that is made. I probably have that out of order in my listing here. It's, as I understand it, functionally obsolete comes from a sufficiency rating of 50 or below. Is that correct, or?
I could talk to that.
Okay, would you please, Kent?
Again, my name's Kent Barnes. The information you got on structural health index, I think that was a good representation. The structural health index of the structure is fairly high, and what that is telling us is the members and the bridge itself, as to what it was intended to be when it was built, is still in good shape. When we talk about it being functionally obsolete, the item that is driving that designation, and it's a federal designation, is, in this case, really the width of the bridge. And you all know this, what you have is a single lane bridge. And you have a single lane bridge that in this case has an average daily traffic of about 2,700 vehicles going across it. And by the federal standard for that designation, that indicates that it is functionally obsolete. Now, for a single lane bridge like that, an average daily traffic of more than 100 would give it functionally obsolete status. So by that definition, 101 vehicles a day gives it functionally obsolete. This bridge has 2,700 vehicles a day. But again, that's a federal definition, and it is used in determining or helping to determine eligibility for replacement funding. But that's all it is.
What is functionally not conforming approach?
And again, this is a federal definition, and what it's looking at is that traffic. So what I have is a single lane bridge that has two-way traffic and 2,000 vehicles plus a day. So functionally, by what's looked at in this definition is, can vehicles reasonably go across it with no more than minor interruptions. So at 2,700 vehicles a day going two different directions across a single lane bridge, the definition says that that isn't functionally sufficient.
How many years is that taking place?
Quite a few.
Please keep in mind that Kent is using a federal definition here that he has no control over, nor did he give the designation to the bridge. So
That is certainly true. He doesn't have control over it, but the term functionally obsolete implies is falling short of what it should be doing. And I think a lot of people in this room question that.
I agree with that statement, but I think we would have to go to the federal government and prove our point with them in order to have that definition either altered or taken off our bridge. And at this point, it isn't really harming what we're doing.
What's the purpose of using this definition? It seems as though the purpose is just to be able to get federal funding here, not after federal funding. The definition is really new to the discussion.
Well, and as I see it, and if somebody can answer this more accurately than I, we'll let Kent do it.
It's a very good question. What is the significance of it? And from a standpoint of this bridge, what it means is, with it being functionally obsolete, and the sufficiency rating it has, it is eligible for federal money. Okay. Other than that, there is no requirement for it to receive federal money. What the significance of the rating really is, and why the federal government has this rating, is we report these up, all states report these up in a consistent manner to the federal government, and they're used really from a statistical standpoint to overlook the entire inventory of bridges across the country and say, okay, how is our infrastructure performing? And in the roll-up, you can look at it and say, what percentage of our bridges are functionally obsolete? The other designation that you hear, and you may have heard it, is structurally deficient. What percentage of the nation's bridges are structurally deficient? And from a roll-up standpoint, those numbers become a good indicator of the health of our infrastructure. What does it mandate for this bridge? Nothing. What does it provide to this bridge? Options. What it provides is the option if the county and the residents of this county wish to pursue it, it is eligible for federal funding. It's providing options.
Sir? Has there been anything in, maybe you guys touched on this earlier, I don't think, but looking into this to determine if the bridge were expanded to a two-lane bridge, how much the traffic flow would increase? Is that something that can be, it seems like a little more special?
that would be a part of a feasibility study to say, if we improve this bridge, what is the result? What is the expected traffic impact? And that would be looked at through options too. What is the impact to this road, or what is the impact to this road? What is the expected impact to the overall flow of traffic?
So there hasn't been any preliminary though?
Not that I know of at this point, no. It'd be a feasibility study item.
Helen?
Is it a given that we'll have a feasibility study? That's something that the county has to determine, or where do we stand on that?
Again, I want to emphasize it's a county project. If the county chooses to move forward, and right now I understand that they're on hold, and how long they're on hold for, I don't know. If the county chooses to go forward, then MDT's position would be that a feasibility study is the next step to take.
And we'll offer that.
And the state would pay for that, is that correct?
Or participate.
And pay.
There's a share.
That would be-
You used the term structurally deficient, I believe it was. Do you happen to know how many bridges are structurally deficient in the local area and nationally?
I don't right off. And it can be a very deceptive term, structurally deficient. I don't like it. It's caused a lot of very bad press, and it's caused a lot of heartache. A bridge can become structurally deficient over oftentimes minor items. They can also be major items. Anytime a bridge is designated that, we take a hard look at it to say, what is actually the problem? What has to be done today? What has to be done tomorrow? Or what has to be done in the future with it? But exactly how many are structurally deficient within the state today, I can't tell you that.
Going back far.
Thanks again, Kent. I'm glad you're here because I'm not an engineer, and I've had to study this myself in order to kind of come up with anything. So Kent is very, very much appreciated, let me tell you. Was there a question, Chris?
I had a statement and a correction. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, my name is Chris Crawford, and I do the history in the area. And I have a diary here where I just noticed that one of the reports said that the last time the bridge was replaced was in 1932. So from the diary of the son, Bill Maclay, his father, Clyde Maclay, rebuilt the bridge. And the quote says about 1950, after Bill had been gone for several years, the Maclay Bridge was destroyed in another spring flood. This time it was replaced with a steel bridge, but not a new one. So that would indicate that the information from the 1932 statement would have been a lumber bridge going up to the steel bridge that would replace it. So that would change the standards there, and I just felt that it was important that that statement be shown through these diaries, that it's quite a significant difference, I think, with that change. So I just thought that I would share that, and if anybody else needs to know the rest, the diary is here, so this is from the family who actually did that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. One of Ken's comments touched on structurally deficient, and I guess while we're here, I would like to comment a little bit about that terminology. And as he says, it's very, basically for me, it was quite confusing. But what I did discover was that we have copies in our records of bridge inspection reports from 2002 through 2010. Those that preceded 2005, I believe, show the term structurally deficient on Maclay Bridge. But actually in 2004, the deck was replaced, And the old wooden deck was removed and it was replaced with a steel, corrugated steel deck. And there were additional stringers put in, and then it was topped with asphalt. And that apparently removed the structurally deficient criteria, and it hasn't appeared on there since then. So Maclay Bridge is not structurally deficient. That brings us to sufficiency rating. Maclay Bridge does have a low sufficiency rating, 32.5. And again, this is a scale of 0 to 100. So we need to kind of take a look at that. It was emphasized here at some point, and so I think in the handouts that you have, my written explanation, I have given you a list of items that I'm not going to say do, I'm going to say may apply to Maclay Bridge and that sufficiency rating. And among those are the approaches, the approach alignments, and various things that go into that rating system. Now, I had to look for a while to find a good definition of sufficiency rating. And the definition, the best one that I found, came from Kansas State Department of Transportation. And it says sufficiency rating is a measure of the sufficiency of a bridge to remain in service. But if you look at all of those different aspects, all those elements that go into that rating, there are a lot of them that, we know that it's the approaches could be better, certainly. There could be some things done perhaps to improve it, but the bridge itself is in good shape. So, in looking at this, that sufficiency rating is commonly used for state and federal highways. Well, my personal feeling is it's a good rating system for state and federal highways. But I don't say that that necessarily applies to a rural county road. And that's the distinction that you folks have got to make as to whether you think it should apply to a rural county road or not. I think that falls into a category of some other research that I've done on called context-sensitive design. In other words, look at everything that goes into the all aspects of that road. There are alternate bridges that exist at Buckhouse on Highway 93 South, and also Kona Ranch Road, and both of those bridges are less than 10 miles away from Maclay Bridge. They're relatively close. As a matter of fact, one of the recent comments that we had from the rural fire chief was that the time difference in a fire response going to the intersection there of River Pines and O'Brien Creek and Blue Mountain and Big Flat Road is 2 minutes and 16 seconds difference for the fire truck, whether he goes around to cross at Buckhouse and comes from the south, or whether he crosses Maclay Bridge. So in actual measured terms, why that's what he's saying. The average daily traffic count in 1997 was 2,700 vehicles. And in 2006, it's 2,774. That's the most recent daily traffic count that's recorded on the bridge inspection reports. And it's interesting to note that between those dates, 1997 and 2006, the ADT actually dropped. It dropped as low as 2,500. So right now we're at 2,774 as far as we know. Let's see, the 1993 environmental assessment for Maclay Bridge replacement did indicate that the preferred location was at the western extension of South Avenue, but did not, as I mentioned earlier, did not make that final determination that it would be. Prior to 2004, the bridge capacity was limited to 10 tons. But with those stringers and the new deck, it was increased to 14 tons. If they do build a replacement bridge, it'll probably be in the about the same configuration as the Kona Ranch Bridge. At that particular crossing, it looks like it would be 1,500 feet long. Yes.
The preferred location at the western extension of South Avenue. That preferred extension, there was nothing behind that. There was a bunch of people that got together, sat at separate tables, and said, well, looking at this, they were looking at aerial photographs. If you look at the aerial photograph, it makes it look like, well, sure, you know, that's where the bridge should be. But there was no study done to come up with any, looking at alternatives to say that's where it, looking at all options, that's where it should be. So I just wanted to make sure that this choice of where the bridge should be is taken in the context that there's no real assessment behind it. But if you look at an aerial photograph, it's kind of like, I usually put it in, yeah, of course, that's where it should go. But, that's, if that's sufficient, okay. But otherwise, you still need to look at what alternatives there are that might make more sense, lower cost, or whatever.
Thank you, Hal.
Isn't that what would be covered in the feasibility study that you were?
That's what would be covered in the environmental documents for preferred alternatives. It would look at all those alternatives. And then at the end of that environmental document, you'll have a record of decision. And then that'll identify for that, if we want to move forward with that bridge order to be built. Bob's right. Right now, they went through the EAA, the environmental assessment. There was no record of decision with that. There was a preferred alternative identified, but it didn't give you the ability to move forward.
But you have to wait for the EA to determine the site. Is that how it works?
Right, and then through that, there'll be a record of decision to certify that, to be eligible for the funding down the road.
And generally, how long does that EA take?
Well, I don't know if there's a timeline for that. We're doing one on Russell Street now
It's
that's
been
been going
dragging
on for
on,
quite
hasn't
some
it?
years. So I think it probably depends on the complexity of the project and the amount of conflicts around that.
Yeah, I'm Thomas Peterson. I live at 4815 South Avenue West, just the west side there.
Anyway, he said it'd be like the Kona Wrench Bridge. On South Avenue, you drop off that hill, you're running about 3 or 4 blocks till you hit the river, 100-year floodplain. Now, do they plan on using fill and making a dam for everybody that's on the south side of that, or are they going to put it on pillars? And if they put it on pillars, how do they figure $13 million for 4 blocks worth of pillars to go across that bridge? Something's haywire.
I'm the wrong person to ask about. There's a structural man. But
I think at this point they're still waiting on the design. I know that a couple of the documents that we looked at the Public Works Department indicated that the bridge, at least the approach to the bridge, would indeed take off at the top of the hill on South Avenue, and what the paper looked as if it was saying, and I'd certainly be willing to send it to you, is that, yeah, there would be some kind of either pillars or fill or something, and so the people on the flat there definitely would have to be considered. And those are things that would be all part of a feasibility study. Does it make it feasible?
Like the Kona Wrench Bridge, there's no way it could be like the Kona Wrench Bridge. That's only 1,500 feet. You're talking 4 blocks.
Yes, we.
If they created a dam there, they could flood everybody out on the south end there. You just want a few homes down there.
I think you're stating exactly what many people have felt, is that there needs to be some more looking here, that there are some other facts and figures that need to come out. That's part of what we're trying to do tonight, too.
excuse me, Peggy, but back as part of that 93 study, there was what they call a backwater study done. And based on the Corps of Engineers oversight and so forth, they cannot have a backwater of more than 1/2 foot as a result of a bridge like that. So otherwise the Corps wouldn't permit it. So it's got to be a suspension, suspended in some manner, piers or something. And but there would not be any type of a dam there to.
Well, if it's piers, they can't be talking 1,500 feet. So you're talking a heck of a lot more than $13 million. I used to work building dams, and I know the cost, what it costs for that cement. When you start talking that kind of a length, it's just 13 million when you begin with it.
I just want to remind everybody that the term Kona-style bridge came directly from the Missoula County Public Works Director. That's the source of that comment, of that description.
If the 93 EA identified a preferred alternative, they must have done some sort of analysis to determine the feasibility at that time, or no? Or even the...
I was involved in it. I didn't, there was no such thing.
So the EA must have no substance to it then?
What EA?
The 93 EA.
There is an EA document, although there was no decision made to it, which is the whole point of doing an EA, is to come to a decision, but the 1993 document did not come to a decision. So obviously validity could be questioned. So I do want to try and be out of here by 8 or shortly thereafter, and I know that some of you have questions. I don't know whether you've noticed, but I've got paper up on the wall over there. I know some people are reluctant to stand up and speak into a microphone. There's an opportunity there to leave us some suggestions and thoughts. Suzanne, if you'd like to, there'll be 2 legal pads coming around on clipboards. If you want to add comments there, please do so. You were given as you came in a questionnaire. If you need a pencil to answer that, there are pencils back on the table, thanks to Mr. Lofsgarden. And we do want your questionnaire returned to us. This is not an official survey, it is just what it says. It's a questionnaire. And if you've got comments, please add them to that. And there's a box back there where Andrew Calvis is standing, the lady in the red. If you, when we do dismiss or do leave, please put your questionnaire there. If you do have something specifically that you want answered, you have a couple of places to go. One is our website, Maclay Bridge. I need to back up there. I put the wrong hat on in that sentence. Let's put, okay. There is a website that you may refer to, and it is www.maclaybridge.org. And if you have questions, there is an email address there that you can put your question to, and the person will respond. So we are trying in as many ways as an association to gain information from you. And if you can talk to your neighbors and get information from them. We're not trying to take a poll or anything and say, this many were for it, this many were against it. We don't even know what it is at this point. We're just finding information. Don?
Since time is getting a little short, Bob forgot to mention this, but if you look at the 3 or 4 pages that follow this fact sheet, there's an expansion of information on every one of these points. A great deal of information about these definitions that the federal government has and so on. And secondly, if you could take time to check off that questionnaire before you leave tonight, there's 4 questions where it's just a check off on it, and then the 5th question is to just check what area you're from. Now there's lots of space to write down your comments, your questions, but the basic part of it, if you're in a hurry, you can just check those off real easily. Don, did I say my name?
No.
I'm Don Lofsgaard.
I would like to jump ahead for a minute, if I may, here to one other item that is not on this sheet, and that is Don, or excuse me, Doug Moeller, I'm sorry. Anyway, had mentioned that he would be happy to talk about the funding mechanism for this thing, and maybe he could give you a run-through on how this funding works and where the critical points are.
All right, Doug, I will gladly hand this over.
Well, yeah, and part of it is, and I don't know if there's any questions, if anybody has any questions, is it on? On how the off system, how this bridge was picked for the off system, on the county's priority list for the off system bridge too. So if somebody has any questions on that, Ken can probably fill that in a little bit. But as far as the funding for the for off system bridges, Bob, I noticed in your notes there under your headings that you mentioned congressional approval to move forward if the bridge was identified to be replaced. It doesn't really, we don't get congressional approval for that certain bridge. We've got, basically it's for off-system bridges in our highway program. And each year Montana receives approximately $300 million a year for our highway program. And part of that is bridges. And in part of the bridges, we have an off-system category in that portion too. So we wouldn't have to go get congressional approval if the project was picked. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And then there again, that all depends on what our federal funding is in the coming years. Right now, we base our funding on what we've been receiving in the past, and as we plan, typically 4 to 5 years out, we plan on those dollars. We just don't know what to expect in the future, but we have to plan ahead. So that's how we structured those projects. Does that help?
That helps.
Okay.
Gary, right behind you. George, right there. Whoa.
You want to dance? Gary Bocek. Hey, one question, Kent, on feasibility studies. Who defines the scope of that feasibility study? In other words, Can it expand further than, obviously further than the bridge itself? Example, obviously South Avenue has the potential for being significantly impacted. How far does that impact potentially go from? Does the county set that, or is it part of a public hearing type situation? Thank you.
And I'm going to tell you again, it's a county project, so that the county would be setting that scope, but anything dealing with that bridge, we would have to look at the logically connected impacts to that. So if you're putting a bridge, and let's just say we're going to look at an option for south, which would be looked at in the feasibility. So what are the logical ramifications to that? Well, that wouldn't be way down on the other end of south, but it would certainly be some distance down south. So yes, it would look at those, it would look at the options and the reasonable ramifications related to that project.
My name is Bob Carter. I live on Spurgeon Road. Is this a use it or lose it proposition for the county? If the funds are made available for the county and the county decides not to move forward with the bridge, do they get to use those funds some other way, or do they lose the funds completely and the funds are allocated someplace else in the state?
I'm sure glad you guys came tonight.
Always a good question. The bridge program is a statewide program. So when we're looking at bridges, all the counties are nominating, or quote, nominating or prioritizing bridges, and we have the task of trying to say what seems to be a statewide priority. So the funds would still go somewhere in the state. Would the county per se lose them? No. Other bridges would come around, maybe this one would come up again. Missoula County has other bridges, but they would have to be evaluated versus other bridges in the state.
Okay, good. So that brings up to the next question. So did Missoula County say, we've identified this bridge, now we want to do this, or did this bridge simply just bubble up through the system of priorities and it finally reached the top?
And that's also a good question. Thank you. What we do get, like Doug said, we have some money that is designated for off-system bridges. So what we do is we go out to the counties and we try to provide them a list of eligible bridges. We talked a little bit about what makes them eligible: functionally obsolescence, structural deficiency, and we ask the counties to prioritize them and say which ones what are their priorities. And Missoula County identified the Maclay Bridge as their #1 priority when we asked them.
Okay, and last question, I promise. What is generally the split between the county and the state funding? Is it, I know you can't give an exact number, but is it usually 50-50? Does it sometimes go 80-20? Might the county be having to pitch in 10% of this bridge and then the state's going to take care of the next 90%? Is there a range of figures you could let us know?
There is no magical number when we're talking about splits. Now, the highway bridge program would fund the bridge, at a minimum would fund the bridge, and I believe that the state would pay the federal match on the bridge portion of it. What we have is a bridge replacement program, so when we look at the road connections, that becomes a question of, is that funded through the bridge program or is that funded through other things? And those are things that need to be addressed with the county in the MOA and a decision made on that. So there is no definitive rule on that, but that is, all funding is open for discussion right now.
Thank you.
Recently, in fact, I think today or yesterday, passed in Congress a very large cut in federal highway funds. Does that have some ramifications for this?
There is right now, we typically operate under a 6-year federal funding bill. The last 6-year federal funding bill expired a year and a half ago now. We are unsure what will come out in federal funding. We hear the same things you're hearing, large cuts, and it's hard to define exactly what that means. I mean, you're aware of what a tax cut can mean. It means that we didn't raise them as much as we expected to, so therefore it's a tax cut. But there's a lot of things that go into that when we talk about transportation funding, and exactly where those cuts are being made, we don't know. It will take some time to sort those things out once there is a funding bill in place. And we don't know when that will occur.
At the risk of preaching to the choir here, we're in the midst of the worst crisis in public funding in living memory. It follows from that we should be extra careful about how public money is spent, and to impose on a community that does not want it a bridge that's going to cost vastly more than has been listed seems like the worst kind of public policy.
I'm not sure if anyone here can answer this question, but do you know what the criteria were used for the county to determine this was a priority? Were we getting complaints of traffic? Are they expecting more development on big flats and on target range? Have there been safety concerns? What's driving this to be a #1 priority?
That's one question that I don't believe the Alliance has been able to answer. Guess that's being politically correct. 2002 is the first reference to the fact that this bridge was the county's top priority, although we are aware of the history back in 93, 94. None of the records at Public Works has any reference to why. And the only thing that I have encountered is in a meeting where one of the county commissioners just said, well, I guess other commissioners thought it was a good idea. And again, I'm going to try to be politically correct here. That is one area that we certainly, I keep putting the wrong hat on, excuse me. That is one area certainly where the Alliance could continue to do some research and see what they can come up with. That is not a question I can answer. Does anyone? I'm sorry. The question was, are there other one-lane bridges in the county? And I think that could perhaps be extended to in the state. Once again? Elk Creek Road. Big Fork has a one-way bridge going into it. Pardon? On Elk Creek, okay. The ADT is much lower. That's what we're all here for, to find out what we know and what we don't know, and where the Alliance can continue doing their research. And the research will go on the website, correct, Mr. Carter? Thank you, sir. Yes?
There seems to be a lot of opposition to it. What's your guys' take on the safety side of the ability to move a water fire truck across it?
Excellent question. What is the take on the concept of, the idea of safety with this current bridge and not being able to take their #1 water engine across?
Well, we just heard there was a 2-minute difference between Maclay Bridge and Buckhouse to the intersection of River Pine and Union intersection.
You will find in your packet, incidentally, a letter from Rural Fire Chief Bill Caldwell, who was not able to attend tonight because he's taking a look in California. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to go to California right now? Anyway, at a new fire engine that they're thinking of buying and bringing up here. In my conversation with the fire chief, he indicated that there is a water truck currently stationed at Lolo. It is smaller than the one that is stationed here, but it can go across this bridge filled with water. So it is not a case of that the first responders have no water available to them. And I think safety is an issue in the minds of the county commissioners. And I think that is, and Commissioner Curtis is correct when she says that insurance rates are affected. So these are our thoughts. That's information to keep in mind because it is there in making a decision. Mr. Stewart, welcome back. You may have to turn that one on. Is it on? There should be just a...
I think that the safety issue is one of the more important things that we would want to have feasibility analysis, because there's other ways to deal with response time, and you know, as lay people, we don't know what the options are other than a smaller fire truck, positioning a fire truck someplace else. If we're looking at I don't know, I can do the numbers easier if it's like $20 million, you know. A $20 million bond issue, well, that generates a lot of interest payments, and maybe it would be cheaper to position a fire truck someplace else. Those are the kinds of things that we would like to see examined in a feasibility study. And then that leads into my question for the folks from the state. The commissioners have made a comment that they would like to have a feasibility study that was managed by possibly the Office of Planning and Grants by the county rather than turning it over to the state. And so I'm curious as to whether that's any kind of a problem. Is there a territorial thing there that if the county leads a feasibility study, that's different than the state leading a feasibility study?
Is this on again? Okay. I think the thing when you decide who's going to manage that feasibility study is, and then the county will definitely be the lead on how that's going to be done, but it has to make sure that it's done properly to be eligible to be included into the environmental process. So it has to go through who runs it or not. It still has to meet certain criteria to be eligible to be included into the environmental process. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
I guess I still have a concern here about moving forward with the feasibility study. I mean, that's still money being spent by the county, and we still haven't determined why we even have a need for this before we even start spending money on determining where it can go and how it can go. I just don't understand the criteria that were used, and I think that's one of the questions that needs to be answered.
I agree. I think that is one question that the Alliance can really start digging into. You know, where did this priority listing come from? Willis, an answer?
I have a question, though, first. I don't know, Kent or Doug, if you can answer this. And we're assuming that where a replacement, if or where a replacement is built, what will be the right-of-way requirements for replacement? You don't know. Okay, what would be the minimum driving lanes? Because the county's talked about the smallest bridge possible. What would be the minimum driving lanes that you would, to meet federal standards, since there's federal money here? Or can you answer that question?
The question is not a simple one to answer. It seems like it should be. What would be the minimum standard for it? It would be determined through a feasibility study. And I hate to hide behind that, and it sounds like I am. I heard the terminology a little bit ago, context sensitive, and this would be, there are potentially context sensitive issues that would be looked at in this, and other issues. So exactly what that would mean would have to be determined through that feasibility study. You asked what is a traffic lane? A traffic lane is 12 foot wide. So if you have 2 traffic lanes, there's 24 feet. Then do you have shoulders? Do you have, and I know that previously bike paths have been thought about, maybe maintaining that other ways. All of these things are feasibility study issues.
So there's no set width of the road?
There is no predetermined width. There are standards that would apply, that we would apply if it were on-highway system road, but those don't apply here, so no, there is no fixed minimum standard.
The term off-system has been used here quite a bit this evening, and off-system is what the Maclay Bridge is. It is not a highway system. It is not a main arterial. And that is a term that we do need to make sure is at least defined in our own minds. Please, go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank you guys for putting this together. I know it's been an ongoing task, and I really appreciate it. And yeah.
Thank you.
And also for you guys coming over and meeting with us. I think it is so important that government is transparent. And I really appreciate this community for pushing for transparency. Why are we thinking of spending this money? Why was this decision made? And I think sometimes government may forget that, in fact, we are paying for them to help us. And I think that this group is trying to help the process. So I really appreciate everybody coming together and kind of forcing some accountability and some transparency, because I think that's what government's all about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The Maclay Bridge Alliance Group has put in a tremendous number of hours on the information that you have in your hands right now. And as you've discovered throughout the evening, I wear two hats. I try to be the association neutral party, and yet at the same time I have been in on all of the work that the Alliance has been doing. So please pardon me if I sometimes misspoke and said we instead of the Alliance. It's sometimes hard to split the difference. Use the website, please. If you have questions or comments, the email address on there is viable and it works and it does get you answers. If we do not have your email address, please be assured that all messages are sent out BCC, which means that only one person sees his own address, all the rest of them are invisible. And I know that privacy and private email addresses is important to people. And we'd be glad, I would be glad to add you to the Maclay Bridge group that gets pretty much everything that comes through, unless it duplicates something. The group meets at Fred Stewart's office at Fort Missoula this Friday at noon. And if you would like to attend, it would be appreciated if you would either give me a call or give Fred Stewart a call. The room fits about a dozen people, and after that, we'd have to sit on each other's laps. Somebody might even have to get up and dance on the table, but we could find a bigger spot if we have people that are interested in coming. And it's basically a research group right now, researching information. We are not pushing any plan, any alternative. Mr. Taylor, loudly and clearly, please.
I'd just like to make a comment. I'm very pleased that we got a nice turnout tonight. And it's too bad that the BCC chose not to make an appearance tonight. And I'd like to just point out that it's quite possible that in the positions that they are, they would like to think that we're going to lose interest. So I think this is a good sign that we're not going to lose interest. So let's maintain our vigilance, maintain engagement, and we can always make comments by email to the BCC, letters to the editor. Let's just stay engaged as well as we can. So, thank you.
I will say this. If any of you watched the KECI interview, I don't know, was it Monday night or Tuesday night? where I had a 10-second blurb and Commissioner Curtis had her blurb. She sounded very strident, very much like, I wish they'd get out of our faces. And I received a very, very nice email from her this afternoon that was on almost 180 turnaround. She was very polite, very courteous, invited us to share information with them and so on. So I think through the persistence of the Alliance, the Commission is coming around to realize that the Alliance is not a fly-by-night group. It isn't a small group of 5 or 6 people, that it involves an entire neighborhood that is not going to go away. That we do want answers. Sir, they do work for us. And only if we insist, perhaps. Are there any other questions or comments that anyone would care to make on Mike? And again, I remind you, we've got papers up over there that you're welcome to write. You can write on the back of your questionnaire. There are 2 legal pads coming around on clipboards that you're welcome to write on, because I do know that sometimes we just don't feel comfortable vocally expressing ourselves in front of a rather large group. Go ahead, Helen.
I'd just like to say a special thank you.
Put your mic closer to your face. You're on.
Am I on? Thank Mr. Moeller and is it Mr. Barnes for coming this evening. We really appreciate it. It's very, very helpful because we've been struggling for looking for answers. And you've been hugely helpful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen. I hope you felt that it was an informational evening for you two, at least to get a perspective of what's here. And Mr. Stack, I appreciate your presence this evening. Shane Stack is also with MDT and has been the unfortunate recipient of I take that back, it's not unfortunate, but he has been very cordial in allowing Willis and Fred to sit on teleconferences and so on, and that is greatly appreciated. It's nice to have government that we can contact that will say, here, what do you need? We can help you. Anyone else for the good of the order? I'm 19 minutes beyond the time I set, but I guess that's fortunate because any of you that have sat through a Homeowners Association meeting, I say an hour and we usually get out at 9. So, any other questions? If you'd grab the chair that you were, your questionnaires, please. Anything else that I should make for the good of the order that I'm forgetting? All right. If you would be good enough to put your chair in the rack upon which you are sitting, I'm sure that the rest of the executive board will put the others away. Thank you for coming and good night.